Jake Thompson woke up that Tuesday morning with a burning desire to cause trouble. The 28-year-old man had always been different from others in his neighborhood. While most people started their day with coffee and breakfast, Jake started his day by planning how to make someone else miserable. He rolled out of his messy bed in his small apartment and walked straight to his closet. Inside hung his favorite black leather jacket, the one with silver studs that made him feel powerful and dangerous. The morning sun was already climbing high in the California sky when Jake stepped outside. His pride and joy sat waiting for him in the parking lot. It was a massive black Harley-Davidson motorcycle that he had bought with money from his construction job. The bike was his most precious possession, more important to him than any friend or family member. He had spent countless hours polishing its chrome parts until they gleamed like mirrors. The leather seat was worn from years of use, and the handlebars were positioned just right for his tall frame. Jake pulled on his thick leather gloves and swung his leg over the motorcycle seat. He pressed the start button, and the engine roared to life with a sound that could wake the entire neighborhood. The vibration traveled through his body, making him feel alive and powerful. This was his favorite part of every day. The moment when he became the king of the road, the man everyone feared and respected. At least, that was what he told himself. The wealthy neighborhood of Malibu stretched out before him like a playground filled with perfect targets. Jake had been riding through these streets for over 6 months now, and he knew every corner, every house, and every person who lived there. The people in this area had money, nice cars, and peaceful lives. This made Jake angry because his own life was so different. He lived paycheck to paycheck, had no real friends, and spent most evenings alone watching television in his cramped apartment. As Jake rode slowly down the tree-lined streets, he noticed how clean and perfect everything looked. The houses were large and painted in soft colors. The lawns were bright green and carefully trimmed. Expensive cars sat in driveways like sleeping giants. Children played safely in front yards while their parents watched from porches. This scene of happiness and peace made something dark twist inside Jake's chest. He wanted to disturb this perfection, to remind these people that the world could be dangerous and unpredictable. Jake had developed a system over the months. He would cruise through the neighborhood looking for easy targets. Old people walking alone were his favorites because they couldn't fight back or chase after him. People walking dogs were also good choices because the loud motorcycle engine would scare the animals and create chaos. Young mothers pushing baby strollers would jump and hurry away when he roared past them. Each scared face gave Jake a twisted sense of satisfaction. The leather jacket felt heavy on his shoulders as he turned onto Maple Street, his hunting ground for today. This particular street was known for its morning walkers. Retired people, dog owners, and joggers used this quiet road for their daily exercise. Jake had memorized their schedules over weeks of observation. He knew exactly when the old woman with the 2 golden dogs would appear. She was his favorite target because her dogs would bark and pull on their leashes when they heard his motorcycle. Jake checked his watch and smiled. It was almost 9 o'clock, which meant his victim would appear any minute now. He positioned his motorcycle at the end of the street and waited like a predator watching for prey. The morning was perfect for his cruel game. The sun was bright, the air was warm, and the street was mostly empty except for a few joggers in the distance. Jake revved his engine a few times, enjoying the loud sound that echoed between the houses. Soon, he would have his fun, and another peaceful morning would be ruined by his selfish need to feel powerful. Margaret Wilson carefully opened her front door and stepped into the beautiful California morning. At 78 years old, she moved slowly but steadily, her silver hair neatly combed and her gentle blue eyes sparkling with joy. She wore her favorite pink cardigan sweater, the one her late husband Robert had bought for her on their 50th wedding anniversary 3 years ago. Her comfortable white walking shoes were laced tight, ready for the daily adventure that brought so much happiness to her quiet life. The moment Margaret appeared in the doorway, 2 golden bundles of fur came rushing toward her with pure excitement. Buddy and Belle were her constant companions, two beautiful golden retrievers who had transformed her lonely days into something wonderful. Buddy was the larger of the two, with a thick coat of golden fur that shimmered in the sunlight. His tail wagged so hard that his entire body wiggled with happiness. Belle was smaller and more delicate, with softer fur and gentle brown eyes that seemed to understand every emotion Margaret felt. Margaret had found these precious dogs at the local animal shelter 2 years ago, just 6 months after Robert passed away from a heart attack. The house had felt so empty and quiet without her husband of 52 years. She would sit in her favorite chair for hours, listening to the silence and wondering how to fill the long days ahead. Her grown children lived in different states and visited only during holidays. The loneliness had been crushing her spirit day by day. Then one afternoon, her neighbor suggested visiting the animal shelter. Margaret had never owned dogs before, but something drew her to the sad eyes of these two golden retrievers who had been abandoned by their previous family. The shelter workers explained that Buddy and Belle were bonded brothers and sister who needed to stay together. Margaret looked into their hopeful faces and knew immediately that they belonged with her. She filled out the adoption papers that same day. Life changed completely after Buddy and Belle came home. Margaret woke up each morning to wet noses nudging her awakened tails wagging with excitement for their daily walk. She had to learn about dog food, veterinary visits, and training commands. The house filled with the sounds of barking, playing, and the gentle patting of paws on hardwood floors. Her kitchen counter was covered with dog treats, toys, and feeding bowls. The backyard became a playground where the dogs could run and chase each other. Every morning at exactly 9 o'clock, Margaret would clip the matching red leashes onto Buddy and Belle's collars. The dogs knew the routine perfectly and would dance around her feet with anticipation. Their morning walk was the highlight of everyone's day. They would stroll down Maple Street, stopping frequently so the dogs could sniff interesting smells or greet other neighborhood pets. Margaret loved watching her dogs discover new scents and sounds. Their curiosity and joy reminded her that every day held small miracles. The neighbors had grown to love seeing Margaret and her dogs during their daily walks. Children would run out of their houses to pet Buddy and Belle, who were always gentle and friendly. Other dog owners would stop for conversations about training tips and funny pet stories. Margaret had made more friends in the past 2 years than she had in the previous decade. The dogs had not only filled the emptiness in her heart, but had also connected her to the community around her. This particular Tuesday morning felt special to Margaret, though she could not explain why. The sun seemed brighter, the air smelled sweeter, and Buddy and Belle appeared extra excited for their adventure. She locked her front door, adjusted her purse strap over her shoulder, and began walking toward Maple Street. The dogs trotted beside her perfectly, their training evident in how well they stayed close to her pace. Margaret smiled as she thought about how much her life had changed since these two furry angels entered her world. Jake spotted Margaret and her dogs exactly where he expected them to be. The elderly woman was walking slowly down Maple Street, her two golden retrievers trotting peacefully beside her. A wicked smile spread across Jake's face as he watched his perfect targets approaching. This was going to be even better than he had imagined. The morning was quiet, with only a few other people visible in the distance. No one would be able to stop him from having his twisted fun. Margaret was completely unaware of the danger lurking nearby. She was enjoying the warm sunshine on her face and listening to the cheerful birds singing in the oak trees that lined the street. Buddy had stopped to sniff an interesting patch of grass, while Belle was watching a butterfly dance among the flowers in someone's front yard. The peaceful scene was exactly what Margaret loved most about their daily walks. Everything felt safe and beautiful in her well-ordered world. Jake revved his motorcycle engine loudly, breaking the morning silence like a thunderclap. The sudden roar echoed between the houses, causing windows to rattle and birds to fly away in panic. Margaret looked up in surprise, her hand automatically moving to her chest as her heart began beating faster. She had heard motorcycles before, but this one sounded different somehow. It sounded angry and threatening, like a wild beast ready to attack. Buddy and Belle immediately sensed danger. Their ears perked up, and their bodies became tense as they heard the approaching motorcycle. Both dogs began whimpering softly, pressing closer to Margaret's legs for protection. They had never heard such a frightening sound before. Their natural instincts told them that something bad was coming their way. Belle started trembling, while Buddy positioned himself between Margaret and the direction of the terrible noise. Jake accelerated his motorcycle and aimed straight toward the small group on the sidewalk. He wanted to see the fear in their eyes, to watch them scramble and panic as he roared past them. The power he felt in that moment was intoxicating. Here he was, a man who usually felt small and insignificant, now commanding fear and respect from others. The motorcycle engine screamed as he pushed it to maximum speed. Margaret saw the black motorcycle racing directly toward them and realized with horror that the rider had no intention of staying on the road. She tried to pull Buddy and Belle out of the way, but the dogs were frozen with terror. Their leashes became tangled around her legs as they pressed against her for safety. Margaret stumbled backward, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might stop completely. She had never experienced such deliberate cruelty in her entire life. At the last possible second, Jake swerved his motorcycle onto the sidewalk, missing Margaret by only inches. The force of his passage sent dirt, gravel, and leaves flying in all directions. The debris hit Margaret and her dogs like tiny missiles, stinging their skin and getting into their eyes. Jake laughed loudly as he saw the chaos he had created. The elderly woman was struggling to keep her balance while her dogs barked frantically in fear and confusion. But Jake was not finished with his cruel game. He made a wide circle and came back for a second attack. This time he rode even closer, revving his engine as loudly as possible. The sound was deafening, causing Buddy and Belle to howl in terror. Margaret fell to her knees, trying desperately to shield her beloved pets from this madman. Tears streamed down her face as she realized that someone actually wanted to hurt them for no reason at all. Other neighbors heard the commotion and looked out of their windows, but no one seemed brave enough to come outside and help. Jake felt invincible as he circled back for a third pass, completely unaware that his actions were being watched by someone who would not stand for such cruelty. Chris Evans had been enjoying a peaceful morning jog through the quiet streets of Malibu. The famous actor was staying at his friend's beach house for a few weeks while taking a break from his busy filming schedule. He wore a simple gray hoodie, black running shorts, and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. Chris valued these rare moments when he could exercise without being recognized by fans or followed by photographers. The morning air felt fresh in his lungs, and his muscles felt strong as he maintained a steady running pace. Chris had chosen this particular neighborhood for his morning runs because it was peaceful and safe. The tree-lined streets reminded him of his childhood home in Massachusetts. He enjoyed seeing families starting their day, people walking their dogs, and children playing in front yards. These normal scenes helped him feel connected to regular life, something that was often missing from his celebrity world in Hollywood. As Chris rounded the corner onto Maple Street, he heard the loud roar of a motorcycle engine. The sound was aggressive and out of place in this quiet residential area. Something about the way the engine revved made Chris feel uneasy. He had grown up around motorcycles and knew the difference between normal riding and someone showing off or causing trouble. This definitely sounded like trouble brewing. Chris slowed his jogging pace and looked ahead to see what was happening. He spotted an elderly woman walking with two golden dogs on the sidewalk. The woman looked frightened and was trying to control her pets, who appeared to be in distress. Then Chris saw the source of the problem. A man on a large black motorcycle was deliberately terrorizing the innocent woman and her animals. The biker was riding dangerously close to them, kicking up dirt and debris while laughing at their fear. Everything inside Chris Evans went cold with anger. Throughout his life, both before and after becoming famous, Chris had always stood up for people who could not defend themselves. His parents had raised him to believe that protecting others was not just the right thing to do, but the only thing to do when witnessing cruelty. This belief had shaped not only his choice to play Captain America, but also how he lived his real life every single day. Chris stopped running completely and watched as the motorcycle rider circled back for another attack on the elderly woman. The dogs were howling in terror while their owner fell to her knees, trying desperately to protect them. Other neighbors were watching from their windows, but no one was coming outside to help. Chris realized that he was probably the only person close enough and brave enough to intervene in this dangerous situation. The actor's mind raced as he considered his options. He could call the police, but they would take several minutes to arrive, and the woman might be seriously hurt by then. He could shout at the motorcycle rider from a distance, but that would probably just make the situation worse. The only real choice was to walk directly into the confrontation and face the bully head-on. Chris had played heroes in movies, but this was different. This was real life, with real consequences and real danger. Chris pulled off his baseball cap and hoodie, knowing that his appearance might work in his favor. He was tall, muscular, and had the confident bearing of someone who was not easily intimidated. Years of physical training for action movies had given him genuine strength and fighting skills. More importantly, his experience playing Captain America had taught him how to project authority and moral certainty even in frightening situations. As Chris began walking purposefully toward the scene, he felt his heartbeat slow down and his mind become crystal clear. This was exactly the kind of moment that separated good people from great people. Anyone could be kind when it was easy and safe. True character was revealed when helping others required personal risk and courage. Chris had always believed that his fame and success meant nothing if he did not use them to make the world a better place. The motorcycle rider was preparing for another cruel pass at the terrified woman and her dogs. Chris could see the man's face clearly now, and he was shocked by the pure joy the bully was taking in causing pain to innocent victims. This was not just reckless behavior or showing off. This was deliberate cruelty from someone who enjoyed making others suffer. Chris knew that such people only understood one language, and he was prepared to speak it fluently. Chris Evans walked directly into the middle of the street, positioning himself between Jake's motorcycle and the terrified elderly woman. His movements were calm and deliberate, showing no fear despite facing a dangerous man on a powerful machine. Chris stood tall with his shoulders squared, his blue eyes focused intently on Jake's face. The actor's voice was steady and controlled when he spoke, but there was steel beneath the politeness. "That's enough," Chris said firmly. "Leave the lady and her dogs alone. Find somewhere else to ride your bike." Jake was so surprised by the sudden appearance of this confident stranger that he almost stalled his motorcycle engine. He had been having so much fun terrorizing Margaret and her pets that he had not noticed anyone approaching. Now there was a tall, muscular man standing in his way, speaking to him like he had the right to tell Jake what to do. The biker's first instinct was anger. Who did this guy think he was, interfering with Jake's fun? "Mind your own business, hero," Jake snarled, revving his engine aggressively. "This doesn't concern you. Keep walking before you get hurt." Chris did not move an inch. He had faced down much more dangerous opponents than this playground bully. During his years playing Captain America, Chris had learned how to project quiet strength and unshakable determination. He knew that bullies were usually cowards underneath their tough exterior, and the key was to call their bluff without backing down or showing fear. "It became my business the moment you started scaring an innocent woman," Chris replied calmly. "She's done nothing to you. Her dogs have done nothing to you. So why don't you pick on someone your own size for a change?" Jake studied this stranger more carefully and realized that the man was not going to be intimidated easily. Chris was obviously in excellent physical condition, with the kind of build that came from serious training and discipline. His stance suggested someone who knew how to handle himself in a fight. But Jake had his motorcycle, which made him feel powerful and dangerous. He decided to try a different approach to scare off this unwanted hero. Jake gunned his engine and drove his motorcycle in a tight circle around Chris, trying to make him jump out of the way. The loud engine noise and the close proximity of the heavy machine would have terrified most people. But Chris simply turned slowly in place, keeping his eyes locked on Jake's face the entire time. The actor's expression never changed, showing neither fear nor anger, just complete focus and determination. "Are you finished showing off?" Chris asked when Jake completed his circle. "Because you're not impressing anyone. You're just proving that you're exactly the kind of person who picks on those weaker than yourself." Margaret was still kneeling on the sidewalk with her arms around Buddy and Belle, but she was watching this incredible scene unfold before her eyes. She could not believe that a complete stranger was willing to put himself in danger to protect her and her dogs. The man facing down the motorcycle bully looked familiar somehow, but Margaret was too frightened and grateful to think clearly about where she might have seen him before. Jake was becoming increasingly frustrated by Chris's calm confidence. Every threat and intimidation tactic that usually worked on other people was having no effect whatsoever on this interfering stranger. The biker could feel his control of the situation slipping away, and that made him angrier than ever. He decided to try one more aggressive move to scare off his opponent. Jake aimed his motorcycle directly at Chris and accelerated quickly, playing a dangerous game of chicken. He was betting that the stranger's courage would break at the last second, forcing him to dive out of the way. Then Jake could claim victory and go back to terrorizing the old woman and her pets. It was a risky move, but Jake's pride would not allow him to back down now. Chris saw the motorcycle racing toward him and made a split-second decision. Instead of jumping aside, he took 2 quick steps forward and slammed his palm down hard on Jake's handlebars, forcing the front wheel to turn sharply to the left. The sudden change in direction caused Jake to lose control momentarily, and he had to fight to keep the heavy motorcycle upright. "Last warning," Chris said quietly, his voice carrying the unmistakable tone of someone who meant exactly what he said. "Leave these people alone and ride away. Right now." Jake's hands were shaking as he gripped his handlebars, though whether from adrenaline or fear, he could not tell. A teenage girl named Emma Rodriguez had been watching the entire confrontation from her bedroom window on the 2nd floor of her house. The 16-year-old was supposed to be getting ready for school, but the commotion outside had captured her complete attention. Emma was a huge Marvel movie fan who had seen every Captain America film multiple times. She knew Chris Evans's face better than most people knew their own family members. When the mysterious stranger first stepped into the street to confront the motorcycle bully, Emma thought he looked familiar. But it was not until he removed his baseball cap and hoodie that she realized exactly who was standing in her neighborhood. Her heart started racing with excitement and disbelief. Captain America himself was right outside her house, protecting an elderly woman from a dangerous criminal. Emma grabbed her smartphone and started recording immediately. Her hands were shaking with excitement as she tried to keep the camera steady and capture every moment of this incredible real-life superhero encounter. She had dreamed of meeting Chris Evans someday, but never imagined it would happen like this. The actor was proving that he was just as brave and heroic in real life as the character he played in movies. "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God," Emma whispered to herself as she filmed. "This is actually happening. Chris Evans is saving someone right in front of my house." Emma quickly opened her social media apps and started live streaming the confrontation. Within seconds, her followers began commenting with shock and amazement. The news spread like wildfire as people shared the video with their friends and family. Emma's follower count was climbing rapidly as word spread about the incredible footage she was capturing. Down on the street, other neighbors had finally worked up the courage to come outside and see what was happening. Mrs. Chen from next door stepped onto her front porch, followed by the Johnson family from across the street. As more people emerged from their houses, several of them began recognizing the tall, muscular man who was fearlessly facing down the motorcycle bully. "Is that really Chris Evans?" whispered Mrs. Chen to her husband, who had joined her on the porch. "I think it is," Mr. Chen replied, squinting to get a better look. "He looks exactly like Captain America, doesn't he?" The growing crowd of neighbors made Jake increasingly nervous. What had started as a simple bullying session against a helpless old woman had somehow turned into a public spectacle with dozens of witnesses. Jake was beginning to realize that he had made a serious mistake by targeting victims in broad daylight on a busy residential street. But his pride and anger prevented him from simply riding away. Jake finally took a closer look at the man who had been defying him so confidently. Something about the stranger's face was definitely familiar, but Jake could not quite place where he had seen it before. Then he heard the whispers from the growing crowd of neighbors, and the horrible truth began to dawn on him. He was not facing some random Good Samaritan who happened to be passing by. He was facing one of the most famous actors in Hollywood. "Wait a minute," Jake said slowly, his voice beginning to shake. "Are you really Chris Evans?" Chris did not answer directly, but his slight smile confirmed what Jake had already begun to suspect. The biker felt his stomach drop as he realized the magnitude of his situation. He had not just picked a fight with some ordinary citizen. He had attacked an elderly woman in front of Captain America himself, and now the entire encounter was probably being recorded by multiple people. Emma's livestream had attracted thousands of viewers within minutes. The comment section was exploding with excitement as people around the world watched Chris Evans stand up to a real-life bully. News outlets and celebrity gossip websites were already picking up the story from social media. Jake's cruel behavior was being broadcast to audiences he could never have imagined. "This is so cool," shouted 10-year-old Tommy Johnson from across the street. "Captain America is in our neighborhood." Other children began running out of their houses to get a better look at their favorite superhero. Parents followed closely behind, some of them taking pictures and videos with their phones. The quiet residential street had transformed into something resembling a movie premiere, with Chris Evans as the unwilling star of an unplanned performance. Jake looked around at all the faces staring at him with disgust and disapproval. He could hear people making comments about what a terrible person he was for picking on an innocent elderly woman and her pets. Some of the neighbors were already on their phones, probably calling the police to report his reckless and dangerous behavior. Jake realized that his life was about to change in ways he had never considered. "I didn't know who you were," Jake said desperately, trying to find some way to excuse his actions. "I was just having some fun. I wasn't going to actually hurt anybody." Chris looked at Jake with complete contempt. "It doesn't matter who I am," he said firmly. "What matters is that you were terrorizing innocent people for your own sick entertainment. That's wrong no matter who's watching." The sound of police sirens could be heard approaching from several blocks away. Multiple neighbors had called 911 to report the dangerous motorcycle rider who was terrorizing an elderly woman and threatening other people in the neighborhood. The dispatcher had received at least 6 different calls within 5 minutes, all describing the same incident on Maple Street. Police officers were responding with high priority because the situation involved potential assault and reckless endangerment. Chris Evans remained perfectly calm as the sirens grew louder. He had not moved from his protective position between Jake and Margaret, maintaining his steady gaze on the increasingly panicked biker. Throughout his career playing Captain America, Chris had learned that true heroism was not about dramatic gestures or flashy displays of power. Real heroism was about standing firm in your principles and protecting those who could not protect themselves, no matter what the cost might be. Real strength isn't about intimidating people who are weaker than you, Chris said quietly to Jake, his voice carrying the weight of absolute moral certainty. Real strength is about using whatever power you have to help others and make the world a better place. You've got it all backwards, and that's why you're going to face the consequences of your actions today. Jake was sweating heavily inside his leather jacket as he watched 2 police cars turn onto Maple Street with their lights flashing. His motorcycle engine was still running, and for a moment he considered trying to speed away from the scene. But there were too many witnesses, too many cameras recording his every move, and nowhere to hide from the inevitable punishment that was coming his way. His shoulders slumped in defeat as he realized that his days of bullying innocent people were over. The first police car pulled up directly beside Jake's motorcycle, and Officer Maria Santos stepped out with her hand resting on her service weapon. She was a 15-year veteran of the Malibu Police Department who had dealt with hundreds of similar situations involving aggressive drivers and public disturbances. Officer Santos quickly assessed the scene, noting the large crowd of witnesses, the elderly woman still kneeling with her dogs, and the tall man who appeared to be mediating the situation. "Turn off your engine and step away from the motorcycle," Officer Santos commanded Jake in a voice that left no room for argument. "Keep your hands where I can see them at all times." Jake complied immediately, his earlier bravado completely gone. He removed his helmet and gloves with shaking hands, revealing a face that was pale with fear and embarrassment. The second police car arrived and positioned itself to block any possible escape route. Officer David Kim emerged and began taking statements from the numerous witnesses who had observed Jake's dangerous and cruel behavior. Chris approached Officer Santos and introduced himself calmly and professionally. Despite his fame and celebrity status, he showed complete respect for the police officers and their authority. Chris explained exactly what he had witnessed, describing Jake's deliberate harassment of Margaret and her dogs in clear, factual terms. He offered to provide a written statement and to testify in court if necessary. "I saw this man repeatedly drive his motorcycle directly at an elderly woman and her pets," Chris told Officer Santos. "He was clearly trying to frighten them for his own amusement. When I asked him to stop, he became aggressive and tried to intimidate me as well. There are dozens of witnesses who saw everything that happened." Margaret Wilson had finally found the strength to stand up with the help of several concerned neighbors. Buddy and Belle were still trembling from their terrifying experience, but they were beginning to calm down now that the loud motorcycle engine had been silenced. Margaret was amazed and grateful that a complete stranger had risked his own safety to protect her and her beloved pets from the cruel bully. Officer Santos took detailed statements from Margaret, Chris, and several neighbors who had witnessed the incident. The evidence against Jake was overwhelming and undeniable. Multiple people had seen him deliberately target the elderly woman, drive recklessly on public streets, and threaten other citizens who tried to intervene. The entire confrontation had been recorded by numerous smartphones and was already spreading across social media platforms. Emma Rodriguez provided her smartphone video to the police officers, showing clear footage of Jake's aggressive behavior and Chris's heroic intervention. The video would serve as crucial evidence in any legal proceedings that followed. Emma could barely contain her excitement about having captured such an important moment on camera, but she tried to maintain a serious demeanor while speaking with the police. Jake was cited for multiple violations including reckless driving, disturbing the peace, harassment, and animal endangerment. His motorcycle was impounded pending a court hearing, and his driver's license was suspended immediately. Officer Santos explained that he would face additional charges if any of the victims chose to file formal complaints against him. The legal consequences of his bullying behavior were going to follow him for months or even years. As Jake was led away to face processing and paperwork, Chris knelt down beside Margaret to check on her condition and make sure she was not injured. The elderly woman was still shaken by her ordeal, but she was more amazed than hurt. She kept thanking Chris repeatedly for his kindness and courage, calling him her guardian angel who had appeared just when she needed help the most. Within 3 hours of Emma Rodriguez posting her live-stream video, the hashtag #CaptainAmericaRL was trending worldwide on every major social media platform. The video had been viewed over 2 million times and shared by hundreds of thousands of people who were amazed to see their favorite superhero actor standing up to a real-life bully. News outlets from around the globe were picking up the story, with headlines praising Chris Evans for his heroic actions in defending an innocent elderly woman. The video spread so quickly that it reached the offices of major television networks before lunchtime. Entertainment reporters and news anchors were scrambling to get more details about the incident, hoping to interview Chris Evans or other witnesses to the confrontation. The story had everything that captured public attention: a beloved celebrity, a clear good versus evil conflict, and a heartwarming display of real courage in everyday life. Margaret Wilson found herself at the center of an international media storm that she could never have imagined. Reporters were calling her home phone constantly, asking for interviews about her experience and her thoughts about Chris Evans. Her quiet, private life had suddenly become public property, and she was struggling to understand how helping her dogs during their morning walk had led to worldwide fame. The most touching response came from animal lovers around the world who were outraged by Jake's cruel treatment of Buddy and Belle. A GoFundMe campaign was started by a dog rescue organization to honor Margaret and to raise money for animal shelters in her name. The campaign goal was originally set at $5,000, but donations poured in so quickly that it reached $50,000 within the first day. Jake Thompson was experiencing the opposite kind of attention, and it was destroying his life piece by piece. The video showing his cruel behavior had been seen by millions of people, and the comment section was filled with angry messages condemning his actions. Someone had identified him by name and discovered his place of employment, leading to thousands of phone calls demanding that he be fired immediately. Jake's boss at the construction company called him into the office the next morning and showed him printouts of angry emails that had been flooding their business account. Customers were threatening to cancel contracts if Jake continued working for the company. The negative publicity was already costing them money, and Jake's employment was terminated effective immediately. His reputation in the community was completely destroyed. The psychological impact on Jake was severe and immediate. He had never considered how his bullying behavior appeared to other people or what the consequences might be if his actions became public knowledge. Seeing himself on video terrorizing an innocent elderly woman and her pets made Jake realize how cruel and pathetic his behavior had been. The shame was overwhelming and inescapable. Chris Evans tried to avoid the media attention and return to his normal routine, but the story had taken on a life of its own. His publicist was fielding dozens of interview requests from television shows, magazines, and podcasts who wanted to discuss his real-life heroism. Chris preferred to keep his charitable work and personal good deeds private, but this incident had been too public to contain. Several talk show hosts invited Chris to appear on their programs to discuss the incident, but he politely declined most of these requests. Chris believed that the focus should remain on the importance of standing up for others rather than on his celebrity status. He did agree to one brief interview with a local news station, where he emphasized that anyone could have done what he did in that situation. "I'm not a real superhero," Chris said during the interview. "I just saw someone who needed help, and I did what I hope anyone else would do in the same situation. The real heroes are people like Margaret, who rescue abandoned animals and show kindness to others every day. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time." The interview only increased public admiration for Chris Evans, as people appreciated his humility and his effort to redirect attention toward Margaret and the importance of helping others. Social media was filled with posts praising Chris not just for his courage, but for his gracious response to the attention that followed. Margaret received hundreds of letters and emails from people around the world who had been touched by her story. Many of the messages came from elderly people who lived alone and found inspiration in how she had built a new life around caring for rescued animals. Dog owners sent pictures of their own pets and shared stories about the joy that animals had brought to their families. The overwhelming response taught Margaret that her simple act of rescuing Buddy and Belle had resonated with people everywhere who understood the healing power of love and companionship. She began to realize that her story was about much more than one morning's frightening encounter with a bully. It was about finding hope and purpose even in the darkest moments of life, and about the courage required to open your heart to others who need care. 3 weeks after the incident on Maple Street, Chris Evans knocked gently on Margaret Wilson's front door, carrying a bouquet of yellow roses and a bag of premium dog treats. He had been thinking about the elderly woman and her pets ever since that frightening morning, wondering how they were recovering from their traumatic experience. Chris believed strongly in following through on the connections he made with people, especially when those connections began with him helping them during difficult times. Margaret opened the door and gasped with surprise and delight when she saw Chris standing on her front porch. Buddy and Belle came running to greet their unexpected visitor, their tails wagging furiously as they remembered the kind man who had protected them from the scary motorcycle rider. The dogs seemed to understand that Chris was a friend who cared about their well-being, and they showered him with affectionate licks and gentle nudges. "I wanted to check on you and make sure you're all doing okay," Chris said warmly as Margaret invited him inside for tea. "That was a pretty frightening experience, and I know it can take time to feel safe again after something like that happens." Margaret's house was filled with photographs of Buddy and Belle, along with pictures of her late husband Robert and their grown children. Chris could see immediately that this was a home filled with love and cherished memories. The living room was comfortable and inviting, with dog toys scattered across the carpet and 2 large pet beds positioned near the fireplace. Everything about the space reflected a life dedicated to caring for others. Over tea and homemade cookies, Margaret shared more of her story with Chris. She told him about the loneliness she had experienced after Robert's death and how adopting Buddy and Belle had given her life new meaning and purpose. She explained that their daily walks had become not just exercise for the dogs, but a way for her to stay connected to her community and maintain friendships with neighbors she had known for decades. Chris was deeply moved by Margaret's resilience and her capacity for love despite experiencing loss and loneliness. He recognized in her the same qualities that he tried to portray in his superhero roles: quiet strength, unwavering compassion, and the determination to keep helping others, even when life became difficult. Margaret was a real-life hero in ways that had nothing to do with fame or special powers. The friendship that developed between Chris and Margaret became one of the most meaningful relationships in both of their lives. Chris would visit every few weeks, sometimes bringing coffee and pastries for impromptu breakfast conversations, other times joining Margaret and her dogs for their morning walks around the neighborhood. These visits gave Chris a sense of grounding and connection to normal life that his celebrity status often made difficult to find. Margaret discovered that Chris was dealing with his own challenges related to fame and public expectations. She became a trusted confidant who could offer perspective and wisdom from her 78 years of life experience. Their conversations covered everything from family relationships to career decisions to the importance of staying true to your values when the world is watching your every move. Jake Thompson's life had taken a dramatically different direction following his encounter with Chris Evans. The public humiliation and legal consequences of his bullying behavior had forced him to confront some uncomfortable truths about himself and his treatment of others. Jake lost his job, his apartment, and most of his friends, but these losses ultimately became the catalyst for positive change in his life. 6 months after the incident, Jake enrolled in anger management counseling and began volunteering at a local animal shelter. Working with abandoned and abused animals taught him about vulnerability and the importance of protecting those who could not protect themselves. Jake discovered that using his strength to help others felt much better than using it to intimidate and frighten people.